I once believed I had found my forever in my wife Jessica. 3.5 years of marriage that I thought were built on love, trust, and honesty. Then came that unexpected early return from my business trip, and the discovery that shattered everything. Finding another man in our bed was bad enough, but learning their affair had been going on for 6 months broke me completely. I disappeared without confrontation, building a new life across the country. A year later, Jessica tracked me down in Arizona, determined to explain. Before I dive into how my world collapsed and how I rebuilt it, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If my story of betrayal and silent dignity resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Trust me, the way this ends will surprise you. I was 32 years old, a software engineer, living in Boston when I met Jessica. We crossed paths at a mutual friend's art gallery opening. She was admiring a vibrant abstract painting, and something about her complete absorption in the artwork captivated me. I introduced myself, and our conversation flowed effortlessly from art to music to our shared love of hiking. Her intelligent brown eyes and genuine laugh drew me in immediately. Our connection was instant and powerful. Within weeks, we were spending every possible moment together. Our courtship was a whirlwind of weekend trips to coastal towns, concerts in the park, and long conversations that stretched until dawn. Jessica worked as a marketing executive for a tech company, and her ambition and creativity matched my own drive. 8 months after meeting, I proposed during a sunrise hike at her favorite mountain overlook. The wedding was everything we had dreamed of, a lakeside ceremony with close friends and family. Her father cried when giving her away, and my mother later told me she had never seen me look happier. Our honeymoon in Hawaii was 2 weeks of pure bliss, swimming with sea turtles, watching sunsets with fruity drinks in hand, and planning our future together. We settled into a charming colonial house in suburban Massachusetts, with a yard big enough for the 2 golden retrievers we planned to adopt. Our early marriage was filled with the joyful work of creating our first real home together. We spent weekends picking out furniture, painting rooms, and planting a small vegetable garden in the backyard. Our shared dreams seemed perfectly aligned. We both wanted to establish our careers, first travel to at least 20 countries together, and eventually start a family once we hit our mid-30s. The love we had felt real, substantial, and unshakable. Those first 3 years were filled with beautiful moments that I treasured. Christmas mornings with homemade cinnamon rolls and thoughtful gifts. Surprising each other with small tokens of affection, for no special reason. A book I mentioned wanting to read would appear on my nightstand, or I would leave her favorite flowers on the kitchen counter before work. We celebrated promotions together, comforted each other through family losses, and created elaborate inside jokes that only we understood. When Jessica was passed over for a promotion, she had worked tirelessly, for I took her on a weekend getaway to a luxury resort to remind her of her worth beyond any job title. When my startup idea failed to secure funding, she stayed up all night helping me rework the business plan, believing in my vision when my own confidence faltered. I noticed the first subtle changes around our 3rd anniversary. Jessica began working later hours, often not returning home until after 8 or 9 in the evening. She became strangely protective of her phone, taking it with her even for quick trips to the bathroom. The passionate goodnight kisses were replaced with quick pecks on the cheek, and our weekend brunches were increasingly interrupted by work calls. She insisted on taking in another room. I dismissed my concerns, telling myself I was being paranoid. Jessica had recently taken on additional responsibilities at work with a new product launch. The stress and longer hours made perfect sense. I trusted her completely and believed in the strength of our marriage. Then there was Mark. He was a new creative director who had joined Jessica's team. She mentioned him casually at first, just another colleague working on the big project, but his name began to appear more frequently in her stories. Mark had such innovative ideas. Mark had complimented her presentation to the executives. Mark had recommended a book she was now obsessed with. Still, I never suspected anything beyond professional admiration. I was secure in our relationship and even suggested inviting Mark and his wife for dinner sometime. Jessica quickly dismissed the idea, saying he was too busy settling in at the company. The business trip to New York was supposed to last 4 days. I was presenting our team's new software platform to potential investors. After a successful second day, we secured the funding earlier than expected. Excited to surprise Jessica, I drove back to Boston without calling ahead, imagining her joy when I walked through the door. It was a Wednesday evening when I pulled into our driveway around 7:30. I noticed an unfamiliar black Audi parked across the street but thought nothing of it, perhaps a neighbor had visitors. The house was oddly quiet when I entered, but the hallway light was on, and Jessica's purse sat on the entryway table. I was about to call out when I heard muffled laughter from upstairs. My feet felt suddenly heavy. As I climbed the stairs, an inexplicable dread building with each step. Our bedroom door was partially open, soft music playing inside. The sounds I heard next confirmed my worst fears before I even saw them. I stood frozen in the doorway watching my wife in our bed, with a man I recognized from her company holiday party photos. Mark. They didn't notice me standing there. I backed away silently, nausea and shock washing over me in waves. I grabbed my still-packed suitcase from the hallway and left as quietly as I had entered. Neither of them ever knew I had been home. I checked into a hotel downtown, unable to process what I had witnessed. The initial shock gave way to a hollowness that seemed to consume me from the inside. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying the scene in endless, torturous loops. The next morning, I remembered that Jessica's work tablet was synced to her personal accounts through cloud storage, a setup I had helped her create for convenience. With trembling hands, I accessed her message history with Mark. What I found destroyed any hope that this was a one-time mistake. Their affair had been going on for 6 months. The messages revealed intimate details of their relationship plans they had made, to meet at hotels, and even discussions about their feelings for each other. Most painful were the messages comparing their relationship to ours, with Jessica complaining about how boring and predictable I had become. They had been sleeping together since the product launch party in January, exactly when I had first noticed changes in her behavior. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. My marriage had been a lie for longer than I could bear to acknowledge. I spent the next 2 weeks meticulously planning my exit while maintaining an Academy Award-worthy performance of normalcy. During the day, I went to work, came home at my usual time, and engaged in mundane conversations about dinner plans and weekend activities. I smiled and nodded as Jessica talked about her day, knowing that her stories were carefully edited versions of the truth. At night, I lay beside her, keeping to my side of the bed, feeling the gulf between us that she thought was invisible. My first step was consulting a divorce attorney. I met with Harold Franklin, a seasoned family lawyer, during my lunch breaks. He advised me on the legal process and helped me understand what documentation I would need. Massachusetts was a no-fault divorce state, so proving infidelity wasn't necessary legally, but I gathered evidence anyway, downloading the messages between Jessica and Mark to secure storage. I systematically gathered all our financial documents, tax returns, investment statements, property deeds, and made copies. I opened new bank accounts at a different bank and began redirecting my direct deposits from work. I carefully calculated what assets were solely mine versus joint property, following my attorney's advice to the letter, to ensure I was acting legally and fairly despite my broken heart. When Jessica was at work, I quietly packed the items that held sentimental value to me: photographs from before our relationship, gifts from my parents, books, and mementos from my childhood and college years. I shipped these boxes to my cousin's address in Connecticut, telling him only that I was planning to surprise Jessica with a home renovation and needed to store some things temporarily. The hardest part was finding somewhere to go. I needed a clean break somewhere, far enough that random encounters would be impossible. Through a college friend who had moved to Arizona years earlier, I learned about an opening in my company's Phoenix office. A quick call to my sympathetic manager, who knew nothing of my personal situation but respected my work, secured me the transfer. I found an apartment in a modern complex in North Phoenix, signing the lease electronically and paying the deposit from my new separate account. On the day I left, I waited until Jessica departed for work. She kissed me goodbye as usual, telling me she had a late meeting and not to wait up. I replied with what would be my final words to her face. "Have a great day. See you tonight." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Once she was gone, I moved quickly. I had already packed my essentials the night before, while she was in the shower: a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and important documents. and a few personal items I hadn't shipped ahead. I took only what was undeniably mine, leaving behind furniture and wedding gifts. The only thing I took from our shared purchases was the coffee maker I had researched for weeks before buying an insignificant item, but somehow it felt important. At exactly 9:15 that morning, when I knew Jessica would be in her daily team meeting, I sent her a text message. "I know about you and Mark. I've seen everything. I'm filing for divorce. Please don't try to contact me." I then blocked her number, deleted my social media accounts, and changed my email address. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a printed sheet with my lawyer's contact information. By 10 o'clock, I was on the interstate heading west, putting miles between myself and the life I had thought would be forever. The 26-hour drive to Arizona became a blur of highway exits, gas station coffees, and cheap motels. I barely remembered the states I passed through my mind, alternating between numbing emptiness and crushing pain. I played podcasts and audiobooks at maximum volume, anything to drown out my thoughts. My first weeks in Phoenix were disorienting. The desert landscape felt alien after years in New England. My apartment was a sterile blank space with rented furniture and bare walls. I threw myself into setting up my new workplace, grateful for the distraction of learning new systems and meeting new colleagues who knew nothing about my past. The emptiness followed me home each evening. I would stand in my kitchen realizing I had no idea what to cook for just myself anymore. Simple decisions paralyzed me. What shows did I actually like to watch? What music was my taste versus hers? I felt like I was rediscovering a stranger myself. After a month of barely functioning, I started seeing Dr. Rodriguez, a therapist specializing in trauma and major life transitions. Our weekly sessions became an anchor in my unmoored existence. She helped me understand that my response silent departure was neither cowardly nor noble, but a self-protective measure that made sense for someone whose trust had been so thoroughly violated. Slowly, I began establishing new routines. Morning runs in a nearby park. Cooking classes at the local community college, where I learned to make meals for one without feeling pathetic. I discovered that I enjoyed spicy food, something Jessica had always vetoed. I bought plants for my apartment, taking satisfaction in keeping something alive and thriving. The divorce proceeded without direct contact. All communication went through our attorneys. Jessica initially tried to reach me through friends and family, but I had asked them to respect my need for complete separation. Most understood, though. My mother gently suggested that closure might require conversation. I wasn't ready. The divorce was finalized 5 months after I left the papers, arriving in my mailbox on an ordinary Tuesday that somehow felt momentous. At the 6-month mark, I noticed the first real signs of healing. I went entire days without thinking about Jessica. I joined a rock climbing gym and made friends with a group of regular climbers who met on Thursday nights. Thomas, a graphic designer with an infectious laugh, became a particularly good friend, inviting me to local events and introducing me to his wider social circle. Work became more than just a distraction. I was assigned to lead a new project developing software for renewable energy systems, something I was genuinely passionate about. My team was talented and motivated, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose beyond just surviving each day. I also discovered photography, something I had always been interested in, but never pursued. The stark beauty of the Arizona desert provided endless inspiration. I spent weekends hiking with my camera, learning to capture light and shadow, finding beauty in landscapes so different from the lush greenery of Massachusetts. The process was therapeutic, my focus entirely on the present moment, the technical aspects of aperture and shutter speed, leaving no room for painful memories. By the time a full year had passed, I had built something resembling a life. My apartment now felt like home, decorated with my photographs and books that reflected my interests. I had friends who invited me to barbecues and hiking trips. I had even gone on a few casual dates, though nothing serious. The crushing weight of betrayal had lightened to a dull ache that surfaced only occasionally, usually late at night when defenses were down. I thought I had successfully closed that chapter of my life. I was wrong. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when my past collided with my present. I was at work discussing system architecture with 2 colleagues in our glass-walled conference room. I happened to glance toward the reception area and froze mid-sentence. Jessica was standing at the front desk, speaking with our receptionist. My coworkers noticed my sudden change and followed my gaze. "You okay, Lee? You look like you've seen a ghost," Ryan asked. In many ways I had. A year of no contact, and suddenly, she was here in my carefully constructed new world. She looked different, thinner with shorter hair, and a wariness in her posture that was new. She wore a simple blue dress and clutched her purse with white knuckles. Even from a distance, I could see the nervous energy radiating from her. "I need to handle something," I managed to say. "Can we continue this later?" I walked to reception on legs that didn't feel entirely steady. Jessica saw me approaching, and her eyes widened. "Lee," she said simply, my name, sounding strange in her voice after so long. The receptionist looked between us with curiosity. "This lady says she's an old friend visiting from Boston. Should I add her to the visitor log?" "That won't be necessary," I replied, struggling to keep my voice neutral. "We're going to talk elsewhere." I guided Jessica outside, neither of us speaking, until we reached a small cafe across the street. I chose an outdoor table, unwilling to be confined in a small space with her. The Arizona October sun was pleasant, nothing like the crisp fall days of New England we had once shared. "How did you find me?" I finally asked after we had ordered coffee. Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she arranged and rearranged the sugar packets on the table. "Samantha told me," she admitted, referring to our mutual friend from college. "I've been looking for almost the entire year. I tried everyone we knew. Most refused to tell me anything, but Sam finally took pity on me last month." I made a mental note to have a conversation with Samantha. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," she said, meeting my eyes for the first time. "You disappeared so completely. No goodbye, no confrontation, no chance to explain." I almost laughed at that. "Explain what exactly?" "I saw you with him in our bed. I read months of messages between you. What explanation could possibly matter?" The waitress delivered our coffees, glancing curiously between us before retreating. Jessica waited until she was out of earshot. "Mark left me 2 months after you did," she said, her voice small. "Once our affair wasn't a secret anymore, once there were actual consequences and decisions to be made, he decided he wasn't ready for commitment." I felt no satisfaction at this news, just a hollow echo of past pain. "That's unfortunate, but it has nothing to do with me. I fell apart after you left," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "I lost my job. I started therapy. I moved back in with my parents for a while. It's been a year of completely rebuilding myself and understanding why I destroyed something so precious." I sipped my coffee, unsure what response she wanted. Her pain seemed genuine, but it felt distant, like watching someone through glass. A year ago, her tears would have torn me apart. Now, they barely touched me. "I tried everything to reach you," she said. "Your parents wouldn't tell me anything. Your friends blocked me. Your old company said you'd transferred but wouldn't say where. It was like you had vanished from the earth." "That was the point," I said. "A clean break." Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the table between us. "I know this is crazy," she said, her voice shaking. "But I had to try. I still love you, Lee. The affair was the biggest mistake of my life. I've changed. I've done the work on myself. We were perfect together before I ruined everything, and I believe we could be again." She opened the box, revealing a platinum band with a subtle pattern etched around it, a new wedding ring. My stomach dropped. "I know asking for a second chance seems insane," she continued, words tumbling out faster now. "But we had 3 amazing years before I messed everything up. That has to count for something. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, complete transparency. Couples therapy, moving here to Arizona, if that's what you want. I just need you to consider it." As she spoke, memories flashed through my mind, the way she looked on our wedding day, the sound of her laughter, the devastating image of her with Mark in our bed, the cruel messages I'd read. I was surprised to realize that while the memories were clear, the emotions attached to them had faded. The Jessica sitting across from me now seemed like a character from a book I'd read long ago, familiar but not intimately connected to my current life. "You tracked me across the country to propose." I finally asked, carefully closing the ring box and sliding it back toward her. "To fight for what matters," she corrected. We're still legally divorced. I know that. This would be starting fresh, but with the wisdom of knowing what we had and what we lost. I could see the cafe owner glancing our way, likely noticing Jessica's increasingly emotional state. Her voice had risen, and tears streamed freely down her face now. "Do you ever think about me?" she asked when I remained silent. About us. The truth was complicated. I had thought about her every day for months. But those thoughts had gradually become less frequent, less painful. The woman I had built up in my mind during our marriage, someone who shared my values, who would never betray me, wasn't real. The woman across from me was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Jessica," I said gently, "I've thought about you, yes. But the person I think about isn't really you, it's who I thought you were." Her face crumpled. I made one terrible mistake. It wasn't one mistake I corrected. It was hundreds of individual choices made day after day for 6 months. Every text, every lie about working late, every time you looked me in the eye, knowing what you were hiding, those were all separate decisions. I realized as I spoke that I wasn't angry anymore. The words came from a place of clarity, not pain. And my feelings have changed. I'm different now. I looked at Jessica across the table, seeing both the woman I had once loved and a stranger. The disconnect was jarring, but illuminating. "I can't give you what you came for," I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "The foundation of what we had is gone, and we can't rebuild on broken ground." Jessica stared at the untouched ring box, tears falling onto its velvet surface. "You loved me once," she whispered. "More than anyone ever has." "I did," I acknowledged, "with everything I had. But when trust is completely shattered, it changes who we are to each other. That version of us doesn't exist anymore." "You won't even try." Her voice cracked with desperation. "People make mistakes, Lee. People forgive. This isn't about punishment or forgiveness," I explained. "It's about recognizing that some breaks can't be mended. The person I am now is someone who built himself from scratch after losing everything. That process changed me in ways I never expected." I told her about my journey over the past year. The initial devastation, the disorienting emptiness, and the slow, painful process of rediscovering myself. I explained how the silence and distance had been necessary for my healing, not malicious. "I had to learn who I was without you," I said. "And it turns out I like that person. I respect his boundaries and his capacity for resilience." Jessica listened, wiping away tears. "I never stopped loving you," she insisted. "Even during the affair, as horrible as that sounds. Mark was just, I don't know, an escape. A fantasy. It wasn't real, like what we had." "That makes it worse, not better," I said. "And there's something else you should know. I've been seeing someone for the past 2 months. Her eyes widened slightly. I continued, "Alicia. She's a photographer I met at an exhibition. We're taking things slowly, but it's going well. She knows my history, what I've been through." This revelation seemed to hit Jessica harder than anything else I'd said. The possibility of me with someone else made the finality of our separation concrete in a way my words alone couldn't. "Is she why you won't consider trying again?" she asked, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. "No," I said firmly. Even if Alicia weren't in the picture, my answer would be the same. Our marriage ended the day I found you with Mark. Everything since then has been about building a new life, not trying to resurrect the old one." Jessica sat in silence for several moments, her coffee growing cold. When she spoke again, her voice was different, quieter, resigned. "I had to try. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try." "I understand," I said. And surprisingly, I did. Her journey had been different from mine, but equally painful in its own way. "Can you ever forgive me?" she asked, meeting my eyes directly. I considered the question carefully. "I already have," I realized aloud. Forgiveness was necessary for me to move forward. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean we try again. She nodded slowly, acceptance, gradually replacing desperation in her expression. "I brought something for you," she said, reaching into her purse again. She pulled out a small white box, and slid it across the table. Your wedding ring. You left it on the counter that day. I thought you might want it back to do whatever you need with it. I opened the box and saw the gold band I had once worn proudly. It looked smaller than I remembered and utterly foreign, like an artifact from someone else's life. Thank you, I said, closing the box. Not for the ring, but for accepting my decision, for respecting the boundaries I need. We walked out of the cafe together, stopping on the sidewalk for what we both knew would be our final goodbye. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. I wish you happiness, Jessica said. I mean that sincerely. I wish the same for you, I replied. And I hope you find peace. She hesitated, then stepped forward and briefly embraced me. I allowed it, feeling nothing but a gentle compassion for this person who had once been the center of my world. Then she turned and walked away, not looking back. I watched until she disappeared around a corner, carrying her rejected proposal and our shared past with her. As I walked back to my office, I realized that the encounter had given me something unexpected: complete closure. The wound that had been slowly healing was finally sealed. The Jessica who lived in my memories no longer haunted me, because I had seen the real woman separate from both my idealized past vision and my traumatized recollections. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter wasn't about betrayal or even forgiveness. It was about the profound discovery of my own resilience. When everything familiar was stripped away, I found strengths I never knew I possessed. The ability to start over. The courage to trust again, cautiously but genuinely. The wisdom to recognize that sometimes the quietest exits lead to the loudest personal victories. That evening I told Alicia about Jessica's visit. Her response, kind understanding without jealousy or insecurity, confirmed what I already knew about the healthier relationship we were building. Later, standing on my balcony watching the desert sunset, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful journey that had led me here. The betrayal that had once defined me was now just part of my story, not the ending but a difficult chapter that made the rest of the book more meaningful. Have you ever had to walk away silently from something that was hurting you? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage they need. If you found value in my journey, please subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that better days are ahead. Thank you for being part of my healing journey by listening today.